Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. The OP doesn't like his time to be wasted. In the first story, he retaliated by ruining Thanksgiving for a stupid client. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Gas leak, you say? So I work for a natural gas company. We provide natural gas to our customers. As part of my job, I safety check gas appliances, relight pilots, and respond to emergency gas leak calls. During the cold months, we get a lot of false gas leak reports just because customers can't wait for an appointment to have their pilot lights lit for their heater. When I get these gas leak calls, I can typically tell if they're false reports from the customers. One time on Thanksgiving, I arrived at one of these false gas leak reports, and the customer's inside the home cooking with a whole group of people inside. The customer's told to wait outside of the house for us to come, safety concern. Well, this guy and his family didn't. When I got in, the guy says, "I smell gas coming from my forced air furnace heater." I inspected the thing, and it was in the off position. He says he tried turning it on, and it doesn't work, and later admitted he only called us to come out and turn it on and get it running. I wasn't having it. During this time of year, we're crazy busy and appointments are typically 2 weeks out. I had to stop work at another appointment just to come to this D. As policy, if we don't smell gas, we have to do a full-on investigation. This involves inspecting every gas appliance and gas line in the house. I found a couple small leaks, some of the fittings, couplers, and appliance valve. It's not anything hazardous. Back then, we'd just tell the customer to get it fixed and be on our merry way. Nowadays, we treat it the same way we do with major leaks. Well, that was the first issue I found. The next thing was I found the water heater was not up to code. Won't go too much into detail, but their house was an issue with the flue. I disconnected the water heater. The final issue I found was the gas flex line was improperly connected to the dryer. I disconnected that too. In the end, I shut off the gas to the entire house and locked up the gas meter outside. The guy was not having it. He was PO'd and swearing at me. I told him straight up that we treat every gas leak seriously and he shouldn't have called it in just because he was cold. That false gas leak call probably cost him a couple $100 and a sad Thanksgiving. You should have shouted out loud to the family while patting the dad on the back. You guys need to thank your dad for saving your lives. And our second story. I knocked his ego down a notch. Years ago, I worked at our local museum. I was usually in charge of the bar/cafeteria, but every once in a while I took over a shift from the ticket sale/entrance people. We had this thing that on Saturdays, people living in our city got free entrance. They had to prove they lived in the city, of course. One of those days, I was working the ticket register. I was being shadowed by one of the managers, not officially, but she was just doing something in the same space, so she kept an eye on me as well. This couple comes in, and I know them because they come to the bar every week. I know where they live. I know for a fact that they're inhabitants of our city, so I print them free tickets and wave them through without much hassle. Manager: "You didn't check their IDs." Me: "Yeah, I know them. I see them every week. They live here for sure. You still have to check their IDs." "Even if I've checked them in the last week and checked their IDs then?" "Yes. Every time someone wants free tickets, you check." Side story: there's this dude who's an artist, and while his work is lovely, he has this huge, gigantic ego about it. Your opinion on art doesn't matter because you don't have exhibitions going. That kind of person. He knows everything better that's even remotely related to art, materials, crafting, and that knowledge extends into other areas like architecture, building, politics, that sort of thing. I can't stand the dude for his ego alone. And add to that I know people who commissioned him and he was immensely rude and entitled to them. Not just someone I would willingly recommend working with to anyone. He also has this thing about people not recognizing him because he's supposedly very famous. And ego. So this dude had an exhibition in a part of our museum. He had this habit of coming in and out of the museum multiple times every Saturday because he liked to admire his own work or whatever. Yuck. I have no idea why they don't just give the exhibiting artist a temporary pass badge or whatever, but he'd come through the register for a free ticket every time, multiple times every Saturday. Him: "Give me a ticket to go inside." Me. Can I see your ID, please? What? Your ID, please, so I can verify you're eligible for a free ticket. Don't you know who I am? I'm sorry, but I'll have to see your ID. I don't have it on me. I'm very sorry, I can't let you inside without ID. Can I speak to your manager? She's currently on lunch break, but she reminded me of always having to check for ID just a few moments before she left, so I'm sure she'd say the same thing. But I'm an obnoxious artist. I exhibit in the museum. That may very well be true, but I still need to see your ID to verify. He huffed, he puffed, he stomped off, and he returned with ID later. That must have felt amazing. Great job. And our last story. Never mess with a rich redneck. This is a story about my grandparents' friend. I was a young teen, but given the outcome, this story has stuck with me. I've sat on this story for a while, but it's so satisfying to see a gaggle of Karens taken down a notch that I figured I'd share. For the sake of this story, we'll call my grandparents' friend William. Now, my grandparents knew William from way back. My grandmother knew him from school, and my grandfather met him after marrying my grandmother. Anyways, in the 60s, Grandma was a manager at the 7-Eleven. William led a crew that went there every day. It was the only gas station in a 30-minute radius, so everyone knew everyone in that sleepy coastal town. Now, one day, William was doing a job down on the waterfront and slipped, fell, and broke his back. While he was healing from the operation and was broke as a joke, my grandma would always make sure to send him something to eat that she'd pay for when the crew would come in to grab their snacks and gas up. Knowing William would simply skip the meal to save the money for his own family, my grandpa also took him to several doctor appointments since William couldn't drive for a while and his tiny little wife couldn't wrangle him into a car by herself. William never forgot that. 20 years later, when he sold off his now very successful business and was a millionaire about 20 times over, he promptly told 90% of the world to go to hell, but kept those that had always been there for him close. Meanwhile, he never moved from the house that he'd had since before he was rich. His only concessions to his wealth were trips with his wife to see the world and buying up quite a few acres of the forested land around him. If you weren't his friend, you'd take him for every other blue-collar worker in the town. There was absolutely nothing obvious to show that he was worth tens of millions of dollars. After his wife died in the 90s, William decided to take up a new hobby. As he lived outside the city limits, he set up a sawmill and woodworking shop, got all the proper permits and everything. The saws were in a big old enclosed building in the middle of all that land, so in all honesty, no harm, no foul, right? Wrong. The family that owned the forest behind William's land had just sold it to developers. Thus, the new luxury gated neighborhood, the first in the area, was born. Enter a plethora of Kevins and Karens who were mostly from up north and had moved down south to take advantage of the better weather in the nearby beach. It didn't take long before they decided to take offense to his little business venture on the other side of the 10-foot wall of their neighborhood because it didn't fit with the image of their community. You know, the community he was decidedly not a part of. So they sued him. Didn't even try to start a dialogue with him, just up and sued him. William was livid. He was your typical coastal redneck, and he would be damned if those damn kids told him what to do on his own property. That was not within city limits, nor located in an HOA. William countered with professional noise studies that showed some of the kids in the neighborhood drove vehicles that made more ambient noise than his little operation. Nope, the people in the neighborhood simply threw more money at the lawyers to continue on with the lawsuit. Essentially, their plan was to bleed him dry. Their lawyers, who were not locals, actually told William's lawyer that he should probably advise his client to close the shop so that he wouldn't end up bankrupt due to the resources being thrown at him from the homeowners. Due to the relatively modest surroundings of his home, the neighbors, nor the lawyers, had any idea the man was actually richer than just about all of them put together. All they saw was an older dude who drove a beat-up 80s model truck and wore Dickies jeans and work shirts that lived in what appeared to be a relatively modest home, especially compared to their McMansions. When William's lawyer told him about that conversation, William lost his effing mind. I clearly remember him screeching into my parents' driveway in that old work truck, cussing up a storm and ranting and raving before he even got in the house. He came to our house. Why? Because my grandmother, bless her heart, was known as one of the most giving people in the world, unless you pissed her off. If you hurt her or somebody she cared for, she became one of the most vindictive a-holes that could be found in that town. I'm not kidding when I say that her ability for revenge served cold was legendary amongst the locals. So William had come to her house for a dose of her deviousness. Us kids weren't allowed inside during that conversation, but after he left that day, I later heard the adults talking about how he proceeded to hire quite a few private investigators to see if there would be any dirt to dig up on them. By them, I mean the dozens of people in that neighborhood that were part of that lawsuit. Lo and behold, there was apparently copious amounts of dirt to be had. I still remember him positively crowing about it to my grandparents one fine summer day months later. That 60-something-year-old man was as gleeful as the proverbial kid on Christmas morning. Why? Because after he learned what his little private army dug up, he started making some phone calls to various acquaintances in high places. The ensuing fallout meant that the lawsuit was dropped. There was quite a list of misdeeds that were discovered, but the ones that I heard about, talked about by the adults that stick out are, there were more than a handful of individuals that owed back child support. William very helpfully had the private investigators provide the mothers updated addresses and employment information so that they could pursue said child support / garnishment if they wanted to. On top of that, the IRS became very interested in several of those people, as well as various other neighbors. Finally, one household ended up in prison because the investigators realized they were selling illegal substances professionally. The pictures of the transactions caught by the PIs were helpfully handed over to the sheriff's department. William sounds like a really chill person. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.